So we're in World History, Chapter 21, Political Solutions to Spiritual Problems, which will consist of the Congress of Vienna, the Age of Metternich, New Alliances, Latin America breakdown, the Monroe Doctrine, Greek independence. And here we have a picture of Napoleon. And so securing Europe after Napoleon did a havoc in Europe. So what happens when Napoleon is taken off to prison and now they have to deal with France and have to deal with the European countries? So that's where we're going to start here. After Napoleon's empire was destroyed. Napoleon's empire destroyed political systems of most of European nations. It disrupted the economy of the entire continent. It spread the ideas of the French Revolution, especially the idea of trying to use government to make everyone equal. So Napoleon, he did a lot of havoc, didn't he? So now the leaders tried to restore order and stability, but the havoc created in the ideas of French and German philosophers was not easily rectified. Now we have the German philosophers to deal with. Here's a picture of Napoleon. As they told me, you always wondered why, Napoleon wasn't put to death. Probably because a lot of France and a lot of people still considered him an idol, still considered him their leader. Well, the Congress of Vienna, and here you have a picture of the Congress meeting. September 1814, leading diplomats of Europe met in Vienna, Austria. This lasted 8 months. Can you imagine going to a meeting for 8 months? That's quite a long time. They met to redraw the map of Europe and try to create a political solution to Europe's spiritual problems, which is hard to do, isn't it? To try to find a political solution to spiritual problems. What they needed was a revival, isn't it? But anyway, every European country was represented here at this Vienna Congress, but there were certain main diplomats that actually got up and controlled the group, or were leaders of the group. We have the Tsar Alexander I of Russia. So Russia was there. Lord Castlereagh of Great Britain. Charles Maurice de Talleyrand of France. And then the greatest spokesman was Prince von Metternich of Austria. So these are major countries getting together: Russia, Britain, France, and Austria. But Austria, Prince von Metternich was a diplomat and a very good spokesman. And so he had a lot of influence at the Congress of Vienna. So remember, Congress of Vienna. This actually was called the Age of Metternich because he was the prince of diplomats. That means he could figure this out, and he dominated the decisions that were making, everything that was made in Vienna. So the first half of the 19th century is often called the Age of Metternich. His basic plan was to reestablish the political structure of Europe as it had existed before Napoleon. So Napoleon had come in, he said, we need to bring everything back to before this time, which was a good idea, but really was it? Were things really that well before Napoleon? Well, so anyway, here's a picture of Clemens von Metternich, and he's the Foreign Ministry of Austria and the chief architect of the Congress of Vienna. And he was particularly concerned about the multi-ethnic character of the Austrian Empire. He did not want the ideas of the French Revolution to take root in his empire. He saw what the French Revolution had done. So he put together this plan. Number 1, restoring the royal families that had been in power in each country before Napoleon, encircling France with stable monarchies so it would be hemmed in and barred from future expansion. He didn't want France to expand. He would compensating each country for any land it lost in the redrawing of the boundaries, make sure they got their lands back, and establishing a new balance of power among European nations so each would have strength to deter the aggression of each other. So basically, he was going to give the countries back if they lost any land. He was going to make sure that France had stable monarchs, stability of France, so that they would not form another revolution as had happened under under Louis the 14th and on to Napoleon. And then he would try to balance the power among the European nations. So each nation would have strength so they could stand up against each other, and there wouldn't be one country developing too much power, kind of a checks and balance. So one thing in restoring the royal family, some of those royal families were not very good leaders. So maybe that would have been a problem there. But anyway, up here at the top it says, Clemens von Metternich says, any plan conceived in moderation must fail when the circumstances are set in extremes. So he's basically saying we have the circumstances set in extremes, then plans don't work when things are extreme. Because after this, we'll find the plans worked for just a while. The German Confederation. So the German Confederation was formed. It was the Holy Roman Empire. Remember, that was not restored at all. There was no more Holy Roman Empire. And Germany became hundreds of tiny states, but they divided these tiny states into 38 larger states, kind of as Napoleon did before. And this was called the German Confederation. So here we have a picture where the German Confederation is. Here's Russia, the Austrian Empire, here's France down here, and you can see these countries here. Europe after the Congress of Vienna in 1815, trying to figure out what they're going to do after Napoleon did havoc. New alliances were formed. The Quadruple Alliance first started out, these alliances, these were these countries getting together and, forming alliances and, as for diplomatic purposes. So we have Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Great Britain. That was the Quadruple Alliance. And they wanted to prevent further aggression in Europe, so they allied themselves with each other. In 1818, France did join the alliance to make it the Quintuple Alliance. Can you imagine France? France decided to join them. You would think after all of this and with Napoleon they wouldn't, but they did. Then Russia, the Tsar of Russia, Tsar Alexander I, he insisted of a policy called the Holy Alliance. And he wanted to follow policy based on holy religion, the precepts of justice and Christian charity and peace. That was a good idea, but could it happen? I don't know, because this was an impossible dream for fallen man. So the Quintuple Alliance formed the Congress system that Metternich advised to meet periodically and work together to put down rumblings of revolutions. Well, this did work, but just for a while. So here we have September 1815, Austria, Russia, Prussia, proposed by the Tsar and pledged to observe Christian principles in domestic and international affairs. Good idea, but could it happen? And with fallen man, it was just a dream. So let's go on to the next. Now, at the same time, something was happening clear on the other side of the world. From where Napoleon was in Europe, we had to look to South America. So in Latin America, which is South America and Central America, they started declaring independence. So aristocratic young Latin American Creoles. Creoles were Spanish that were born in the colonies. So they were Spanish, and they worked towards independence from Spain. since they knew now there was a problem in Spain and Europe with Napoleon, so they were working to get their independence. The Creoles resented the authoritarian rule of the Spanish viceroys and wanted governmental power themselves. They wanted to now get away from Spain. So, and then the mestizos were the mixed Spanish and indigenous people. They were upset that they had no voice and little social standing, although many of them had acquired wealth. So we have problems there with the Creoles and the mixed Spanish indigenous mestizos. So let's see what happens. Here's some pictures of the revolution there, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The chain reaction from Napoleon's invasion of Spain and Portugal. So in 1808, Napoleon removed Ferdinand the Seventh from the Spanish throne and replaced his brother Joseph Bonaparte. So he took the leader away from Spain and put on his brother. That's what Napoleon did. The people of Mexico proclaimed allegiance to the deposed king and revolted against Spain in 1810. So basically the people of Mexico is that we're not going to follow Napoleon's brother. We would have followed Ferdinand, but we're not following Napoleon. And so they revolted. The Chilean landowners in Chile declared independence from Spain too. Well, Mexico gained lasting independence till 1821. But the armies of Jose de San Martin and Miranda O'Higgins won Chilean independence in 1818. So that was quite a few years later, 10 years later. So now it's happening clear across the other side of the world. They're seeing what's going on in Europe and saying, we don't want to go back. We don't know where we're going back to. We want to be independent. Simon Bolivar, 1783 to 1830 is when he lived. He is known as the liberator. He was a wealthy Venezuelan, a Creole, and he was a leader, a great leader. He led his army to victory after victory over the Spaniards. He won independence for Bolivia, for Colombia, for Ecuador, for Peru, and for Venezuela. That's a lot of countries to be leading into independence, don't you think? He's a very great leader. So, and then Brazil declared independence from Portugal in 1822. By 1825, all of Latin America, with the exception of Cuba and Puerto Rico and the Guyana colonies, was independent from European rule. So, but political independence did not result in economic and political and social stability. So what happened, they didn't know how to really rule themselves. Although they had independence, they didn't know how to go politically and economically and socially to stabilize their countries. That's the sad part of the story. As they were repressed by Spain, but they needed some help. And many of them, they just needed the Lord. The Monroe Doctrine. Okay, what is this? Well, the powers of Europe proposed to help Spain regain control of these Latin American possessions. So the Spanish said, hey, do you guys realize what's happening here? We have a problem here. We're losing our colonies in Latin America. We're losing them. They're revolting. Come and help us. You said you'd help us for the Congress of Vienna. Remember, said they'd help each other? Well, Great Britain balked as they were sympathetic to the colonies instead. And also Britain had thriving trade and had no desire to see them return to Spain, to Spanish control. So basically Britain said, we're not going to help Spain get back her colonies. And then Britain was joined by the United States of America. In 1823, President Monroe issued the Monroe Doctrine, warning the European powers that intervention in Latin America would be looked on by the United States as an unfriendly act. So this picture, basically, he said, the colonies of Spain, you need to lay hands off. Take your hands off. It says, hands off, the Monroe Doctrine. Take your hands off from the Latin American countries, or the United States would come in against you. That's a big deal. So we were protecting those colonies from these the Spanish rule or any other European country that wanted to come in and control them again. Then we have Greece. What's happening in Greece, and what does it have to do with anything? Well, Greece had major problems with the Ottoman Turks. They were oppressing them majorly, let's just say that. And so Greece arises against Turkey. The Congress system in Europe suffered a final blow as a result of the Greek move for independence in 1821. Remember, the Congress system has to do with the Vienna Conference, right? And so the Greeks arose to overthrow the Turkish rule over them. Metternich tried to get the nations of Europe to ignore this situation and just allow the Turks to take control of Greece. Not a good idea, because the Greeks were really being oppressed. Instead, England, Russia, and France, they all agreed to help Greece win its freedom, its independence from Turkey. In 1827, these nations fought the Turks at Navarino in the Mediterranean Sea. So, England, Russia, and France come to the rescue for Greece, knowing that the Ottoman Turks, what they were doing and what havoc they were doing to the people of Greece. So the Greek independence. So the Treaty of Adrianople, the Turks agreed to submit to the terms offered by England, France, and Russia. Turkey did not want to fight. Now, they would have fought against Greece, but they did not want to fight against England and France and Russia too. So they settled a treaty. And then on to the Treaty of London, which recognized Greece as an independent nation. So the Congress system now of Metternich was totally dead, because basically England, France, and Russia had withdrawn to help Greece. And there was this revolutionary spirit which would spread through Europe at that time. Now, I have to say something. When you say revolutionary spirit, is that a negative or is that a positive? And it can be either way. Because if you have an oppressed country that's being totally oppressed by another country, it's a different story, as our Revolutionary War was in America. But if you have a country that basically is going to use violence and bloodshed and totally, turn into chaos, in that point, as the revolution in France did, you have a different story. As France did not base its revolution at all on anything Christian based, but on an atheistic spirit. So revolutionaries, when you say, and I know in the book here, basically it says this revolution spirit would spread. The revolutionary spirit spread to avail in some areas, taking into the French type of revolution, others as to get out of oppression, both ways. But the difference when it came down to really was the focus on God, and those righteousness exalts a nation. That's where we go back to. Righteousness exalts a nation. So I think that's